means you're done with a paragraph. And a paragraph is a block of text that looks like this. As you start to mess with it and start seeing the changes that you're making when you reload the page, you begin to understand these building blocks that we use to assemble all websites. And while you're editing those theme templates, we might begin to intuit or study what these other pieces of code we're seeing do, because WordPress themes are not just HTML, they're also PHP. And when we first encounter it, PHP, which is a much more powerful programming language rather than simply a markup language, just looks like fancy HTML. There's a couple special words that we can use. Most of them start with WP underscore. And these tools let us do things like only show something on our homepage or only show something when we're on a tag archive. And because we're working with a tool like WordPress that provides this common vocabulary, we can take these individual pieces and we can start understanding what it is that is happening when we view a web page and exactly how, when I type something into the editor on WordPress, how it might go from there through some nebulous database out to being displayed to our users. Or maybe we're not worrying about structure, but we want interactivity. We want something to change on the front end of our site. We want scrolling text or a drop-down or an accordion section. That would lead us to JavaScript, which is the most widespread programming language in the world and the only one that runs right within our web browsers like Edge and Chrome and Firefox. But even in 2017, JavaScript can be pretty confusing, so we can turn to what's called a library, a set of prepackaged tools written in JavaScript. These exist for all programming languages, but I'm only talking about the ones for JavaScript right now. And they can simplify some of these common tasks like making an accordion or making a carousel. jQuery filled and still fills a critical role in the web development community. We have this gap between the first step in drawing the Doge and finishing the image. And that intermediate step of what it is that takes us from the very beginning to being able to build a complex thing is simplified by creating tools that have very well documented learning resources and ways that we can apply them and instructions for how they can solve our problems. And just because a tool isn't brand new doesn't make it obsolete. In a workshop, it's generally the well-worn tools that we reach for first because we know how they work and we trust them. As we're building something, whether it's our site, a plugin, something to help our friend out, we might want to reach a point where we need to store some other type of data in WordPress. And I've seen everything from Foursquare check-ins to e-commerce products stored inside WordPress. And we do what's called data modeling, building out these other types of data with just a couple more pieces of code. In this case, they're bits of PHP that WordPress provides us that lets us define a custom post type. And if you're not familiar with any sort of development, this is where things begin to start sounding pretty arcane. But if you've gone through the first couple steps, it seems incremental. You're just taking one further step beyond where you were before, and suddenly now you have the ability to deal with whole different types of information than posts and pages and comments. Then, as we continue to build things out, we start getting into more and more complex tools and frameworks, and we start ending up talking about things like Backbone and React, these tools that are put together to let us build more complicated interfaces to represent the more complicated information that we've put together. These tools structure our code and give us more powerful tool sets. They teach us good practices. They let us understand why some of the tools we had before might not have been up to the task. And when we start layering these onto these API things that I was talking about earlier, where we can start getting data into and out of WordPress as fluidly as ever before, then we can really start to build up some interesting applications where our mobile devices or our websites talk to each other and let us do things in a really distributed, interesting way. And somewhere along the way here, we realized that we've become a web application developer. It happens step by step, but as we make small steps to improve our website and as we go to meetups and as we ask each other for help and go to the happiness bar, we learn. And as we learn, we grow. And over time, you realize that you know a lot more than you did before. And this can all happen without leaving the WordPress ecosystem. Now, I'm not saying don't leave the WordPress ecosystem. It's good to try out other platforms and tools, but it is still absolutely extraordinary that so much that we can do as we are trying to understand how software works is something that we can learn directly from WordPress. I know of no other product like that, especially one that is not oriented towards developers. And all these other tools that you might hear about if you're a developer, all of these other individual libraries and types of markup and styling and sublanguages and transpilers and runtimes, these are all just pieces of code that people made to solve a problem. It's code all the way down. And code is certainly confusing. It takes a while to understand, but all code can be read and eventually understood. And as we begin to understand it, we begin to be able to share what we know with each other. We begin to demystify what's going on and start teaching each other how these pieces work and spreading that knowledge around. And as we learn these things, someday maybe we find ourselves on this stage talking to all of you. I care about this learning path because it's the one that I've taken. I wouldn't be standing up here without WordPress, and in particular without the Boston WordPress meetup and the Boston WordPress community where I found myself after college. WordPress was what took me from a recent grad who knew a little bit about programming and helped me become a leader within one of the best open source communities in the world, learning bit by bit and one step at a time. And I'm not unique. That was my story, but I certainly know that I'm not unique in that. I know there's several other people here in the room that have followed a similar path. And even outside of development, I know bloggers, writers, poets, people of all different interests and stripes and walks of life that have found something in this group that we have put together around the world that has helped them do what they do better, whether that is getting their voice out there or understanding a little bit more about how to share their work or how to publicize, promote, sell. These paths let us take advantage of the resources that we've put together in each other and use those to grow and to learn and to become better at what we do. And I think that we need to make sure as a community that we keep those paths open. Because while we've not really been paying attention about it, while we've been trying to build this whole WordPress stuff, we've built a learning community. And a learning community is a really special thing. What makes WordPress a learning community? It brings these different types of people together, and it begins to bridge the needs of those of us who use WordPress to achieve non-software goals with the interests of those who want to know how it works and want to help make it better. Keeping everybody in the same room keeps us honest. It keeps us focused on building something that is genuinely useful, and it keeps us thinking about the fact that our community is beyond just ourselves and the people like us. I think that one of the things we need to do to continue building WordPress as a learning community is to do a better job of celebrating diversity and trying to get people who aren't in this room and aren't represented in this community involved. There's a lot that we can learn from them, and there's a lot that we can share. WordPress is used around the world. The more that we can strive to make this tool reflect the diversity of backgrounds and nation that goes into using it as we can, the stronger a tool it's going to be for all of us. In tandem with that, we need to always strive to make sure that our work is accessible so that as many people can benefit from it as possible, whether they are